The emulation scene on iOS just got a really big upgrade. Apple now finally allows emulators natively on the App Store. And with that comes some awesome possibilities. So I'm gonna show you everything you need to get started so you can start playing games like Game Boy, Super Nintendo, the DS, and even higher end stuff like PlayStation. I cannot wait to show you what I discovered so far. Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Yes, in the past, you could technically load emulators onto iPhones and iPads, but it was a very complicated and convoluted process. You would have to either one, sideload them through your phone using something called Alt Store, which involved having a developer account and always having a server on your Mac, which you'd have to be constantly connected to. Oh, and the apps would delete themselves after a week, so you'd have to do this process constantly over and over again just to be able to keep your apps. Or you would have to jailbreak your phone, which is just like a whole process in of itself. You don't want to deal with that. Well, now we don't have to do any of that. Apple has changed the rules of the App Store, and now you can just go to their App Store and just download it. Isn't that crazy? Downloading emulators to your phone? That's never been possible before. No one in the history of ever, literally no one has ever been able to run emulators on their phone. It's just not possible. Best part is pretty much anything can run this. Even a 7-year-old iPhone can still run all these games flawlessly and upscaled. So yes, all the stuff you need to get started is free. However, you might want to spend a little bit of extra money on a few peripherals to make your experience just a little bit better. Touch controls are fine, but if you want something a little bit more comfortable, I'd highly suggest picking up one of these backbone controllers. Now this is the portable phone controller. This is the one that everyone uses. I have the PlayStation edition here. It just clips onto your phone so you can have some physical buttons to finally click on instead of using touch controls. And this one is built really nice. It has both Lightning and USB-C models, and it even has a slot so you can still charge your phone while you're playing. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, but I know $100 might be just a bit much for a lot of people, especially if you don't know if you want to commit to playing games on your phone just yet. So I found a controller that's still pretty good at a much cheaper price. This is the D8 controller, and while it might be just a little bit uglier, it still gets the job done and is way cheaper. It's got Hall effect joysticks if you're into that, RGB lighting that you can change to what you want, but I usually just turn it off, and some really fat triggers that feel great when you're playing games. It is a Bluetooth controller though, there's no physical connection here, so if latency might be something that bugs you, go for the backbone. But this is still a super solid controller for those looking for a cheaper alternative. In terms of price, well, honestly, it's really strange. Sometimes it'll be on Amazon for cheaper, but on some days it'll be on AliExpress for cheaper. It really depends on the day for some reason. Either way, it'll still be way cheaper than a backbone. I'll leave both links in the description so you can check which site has the cheapest price. And of course, all this stuff will work with a regular PlayStation or Xbox controller, so if you have any of those lying around, even better. So, how do you actually get these games on your phone or your iPad? Well, the obvious way is, download them from your own Google Drive, of course. I mean, you do own these games, right? But if you have a Mac, it's really easy. You can literally just airdrop it to your phone. But if you have a bunch of games, it does take a little while. So your other option is just hooking up a USB cable to your Mac. You hit Trust Device when you plug in your phone, open the Finder app, click on the Files tab, and drag and drop your legally owned ROMs to whatever emulator folder you want. On the Windows side, it's a little different. iTunes is officially unsupported now. So they have a new app called Apple Device that is specifically designed to transfer over files, and it's a lot cleaner and simpler than iTunes. It is exclusive to the Microsoft Store, so just download it there. You hit Trust Device when you plug in your phone, click on the Files tab, and there's all of your apps, ready to drag and drop your files into each emulator that you need. If you have a newer iPhone 15 or an iPad, I really like using these USB-C flash drives. They're USB-A on one side, so you can hook it up to a computer or a Windows PC to transfer over your files. Then USB-C, so you can just drag and drop them to your iPad or your phone without having to worry about syncing and cables and all that stuff. These things are really cheap. I'll leave a link to them in the description if you want one. They do also make these for Lightning phones, but they're strangely pricier than the USB-C versions. So I would just suggest just sticking to using a cable for that one. So now that you got all those files on your phone, you might get lucky and they're already unzipped, ready to run. These usually look like a .q file or a .nds or a .iso file. But there's a very high chance that you'll probably run into something called a 7z file, which needs to be extracted. But no worries. Here's a kind of funny tip. You can literally just rename this file to .zip instead, tap on it, and bam, the file is now extracted. No need for any of these extra apps to run these files anymore. Lastly, some emulators will require BIOSes to run anything, so stuff like Nintendo DS and PS1 definitely need BIOSes, so just keep that in mind. You also have to download, rip these from your old consoles, of course. Okay, so now let's go over all the actual emulators themselves. Now, you're probably, oh, hold on, getting a text. Oh man, has this ever happened to you? Got a text from someone that you needed to answer on the spot, but didn't know what to say?
What?
Well, that's where Type AI can help. Type AI is an all-in-one keyboard for iOS devices, directly powered by ChatGPT, so you have an arsenal of tools at your fingertips right in the middle of a conversation. No need to flip back and forth between the ChatGPT app anymore. Just type in your requests, like, for example, write me a corporate speech for this upcoming profits meeting, and it'll generate an answer and send it right back to the person you're texting. It can also continue sentences for you, so if you don't know what to say or how to respond to something, Type AI will generate something for you on the fly. Easy. It can do real-time translating, paraphrasing, change the tone of your writing, and so much more. So head to the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to get a free trial of Type AI Premium. And thanks to Type AI for supporting the channel so we can keep making videos like this. Okay, so let's start with the big one that kicked everything off, Delta. Now this app does everything. It lets you purchase your seats, do your pre-flight check-in, access your boarding pass, and so much more. Oh, wait, what? Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a different app. Never mind. So this is Delta, and this is pretty much going to be the one-stop app for everything Nintendo related. All with a super simple layout that presents your games really nicely, in my opinion. By the way, a little fun fact, this app has been around for years now unofficially, but only recently had they had to change their app icon because a certain giant mega company complained about it. Now you know which company, the one with the red logo and everything. That's right, Adobe complained and said that it looked too similar to their logo, which, I mean, I don't really see it, but sure. So they got a new logo now. What do you think? Which one do you prefer? Anyways, back to Delta. They have all the older retro consoles, so NES and SNES here work perfectly. They look especially vibrant and punchy here for some reason. They look really good. And yes, it even runs the more demanding SNES games, no problem. Although I guess that shouldn't be too much of a surprise, considering that this phone is literally more powerful than my MacBook that I started this channel on. We got both Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, which is perfect because I know a lot of people are going to want to make this their own personal Pokemon machine. A lot of my friends have actually been coming back to Pokemon recently since this came out, since they always have their phone on them. I personally beat Emerald a long time ago, so I've been playing through Astro Boy Omega Factor. This was my absolute favorite game as a kid, and I almost rarely ever hear anyone talk about it. Even as a kid, I always remember thinking this game looks so pretty. We have Nintendo 64, which is really cool being able to run it, but I don't play that much Nintendo 64 nowadays, and no, I won't stop complaining about their heinous controller scheme. And of course, yes, we even have the DS, which lends itself really nice to this format since you have an actual functioning touchscreen you can use. There are some really serious fans of the DS that have made really interesting looking cases for their iPhones that you can buy that are designed for the vertical layout of the DS. Some designs even use Switch controllers just to get the feel right. And speaking of controllers, Delta has an awesome feature that lets you customize the controller skins for your games if you're using touch controls. Now, don't get me wrong, the stock ones are awesome. I honestly really do like the look of these. But some people in the community have gotten really creative with these things. There are skins that are designed to be used one-handed for like RPG games and stuff like that. There's skins that move the game down a bit so you can put YouTube or Netflix or something up there. Oh, yup, my attention span is cooked. And lots of skins that just plain old look really, really cool. There's seriously so many different skins to choose from. If you're mainly playing touchscreen and want to find something new, I'll leave links to where you can find a whole bunch of them in the description, including the ones that I showed off here. And my favorite feature, by far, is casting. Yes, Delta has native support for casting your games to any AirPlay device, like say, your MacBook. So you can use your phone as a controller and just play on a bigger screen. Or if you want to get really ridiculous, yes, you can even cast this to your TV and have like the sickest setup I think I've ever seen. So you could totally blast Pokemon or any other game you want on here. And if you want to play DS games, you can have it set up so you can have the top screen on the TV and the bottom screen display on your phone. So you have the best portable DS experience I think I've ever seen. This is so ridiculous, but seeing stuff like this makes me nerd out like crazy. Okay, regarding iPad. Right now, there's no native iPad version for Delta, so if you were to download it right now, it would just be the iPhone version, but scaled up, which some people will be fine with, but it doesn't exactly fill out the entire screen, and overall, it's just not really built for it. But they are releasing a native iPad version very soon. If you pledge their Patreon, you can get access to it right now, which is really nice. It has proper scaling for iPad screens, so yes, it does fill up the whole screen, which is really nice for local multiplayer because now it's actually viable to use to play with friends and a couple controllers and stuff. It has support for controllers, sure, but if you have a Magic Keyboard or a Folio, it also works with that, which is really nice. It's optimized for multitasking, so if you want to run it next to a YouTube video or something, you can do that. And I can't believe it didn't occur to me before, but you can use the Apple Pencil as a stylus for your DS games. Yeah, you could probably buy a mint condition DS Lite on eBay, or you can buy one Apple Pencil for your super expensive emulator. This is a really great emulator so far, and in the future, it's already been announced that the dev is planning on adding Sega Genesis support, device-to-device multiplayer, and even 3DS support. The only thing I don't like too much about this app is that there's no upscaling options for Nintendo DS, and there's no access to shaders. But other than that, if you just want to hop in, load up your Nintendo games, and know 100% that they're gonna work with no setup, this is one of the best apps the emulation scene has to offer, hands down. Next is PSP, one of my favorite consoles, genuinely. It's the perfect middle ground for where the games are old enough to have nostalgia for, but still modern enough for them to look really good on a modern screen. So great news, we can now use the really famous popular emulator PPSSPP, which is a pretty powerful PlayStation Portable emulator that practically perfects playing portably, providing pretty good performance and plenty of personalization options. Loading up your games is incredibly easy too. In the Files app inside the PPSSPP folder, I made a folder where I can transfer over my games using a flash drive or download it off the internet. And when I go start up the app, I go to the Games tab, go pick up the folder where all my games are, and that's it. You're done. That's all you have to do. And this thing runs like butter. They just updated it to run with the Vulkan backend, so it runs really, really well with all the settings turned up, even on older iPhones. Although, if you're not seeing any issues, I just leave it at OpenGL, to be honest. Now, by default, PSP games run at a native resolution of 272p, which is really low res by today's standards. My girlfriend caught a glance while I was recording this section, and she was like, how did you guys play games like this before? And truthfully, we just didn't care back then. Midnight Club 3 on the go was kind of the dream, and we didn't really care how we got it. But anyways, fortunately, PPSSPP does have upscaling options, so you can run these games at much higher resolutions. On an iPhone 15 Pro, I've been able to run it at 8 times native resolution and still not even break a sweat. I honestly wouldn't go past this though, because on a screen this small, it's not even worth it. You can't even tell the difference past 5x. I have an old iPhone 8 that I wanted to test this on, and even on this 7-year-old iPhone, I was still able to push games at a 4x resolution scale, which still looks awesome. Wait, that can't be right. 7 years old? No, this came out in 2017. That wasn't that long. Oh my God. And of course, it runs phenomenally on iPads too. This is a 2018 iPad Pro that has been around even before the creation of this channel, and this plus a DualSense controller is honestly super sweet. And this came out in 2018, so this is like a 6-year-old iPad still running this phenomenally. Since the PSP had no right analog stick, I usually rebind the camera controls to the right joystick, so it's a bit more natural to move around. I definitely recommend you doing the same. And my favorite feature, yes, it can even do multiplayer, so you can play with your friends, locally, all on the same network. You're just gonna pick whoever's cute? Okay, I'd be a jerk if I didn't show you how to do this at least. It's really easy. If you're the person that wants to host, on your phone, you go to Settings, go to Networking, then Enable Networking. Then check this box down here to start your server. Then we're gonna set up our server address as our phone's IP address. If you don't know your phone's IP, don't worry, you can hit Toggle List and it'll be the very last one here. Finally, scroll all the way down and set your port offset to 20,000. It seems to be what consistently works for me. And that's it, you're done. On your friend's side, it's the exact same thing. Just make sure that they type in your IP, not their own. So now you can just hop into an online room in any game that you want, and your friends should be able to see the room and connect to it. I don't have a lot of friends, so I just played Tekken with my girlfriend. She's not very good, but it's okay because I'm not either. What do you think? Why are you beating my ass? And we also played some other games too. There's no way you're ahead of me right now, dude. Now there is a way to play online multiplayer with other people, but I couldn't get it to work on any game except for Battlefront. And even then it was really buggy and it was just a laggy mess. Yes, I had UPnP enabled on my router and all that. I'll keep trying, but if anyone knows what I'm doing wrong, let me know in my Discord. I'm always in there. A little specific tip to PPSSPP that I haven't seen anywhere. These file sizes for these games can start to add up over time. So if you're trying to save some space, there's a really great app on Windows that lets you convert your ISO ROMs into CHD ROMs, which can compress these files by 30 to 40%. PPSSPP reads these files just like ISO ROMs, so there's literally no downsides. You just download both necessary EXEs, launch the one with the green H icon, pick which ROMs you want to compress, and hit Create CID. And that's it. Your ROMs are compressed as much as possible. If you have a big library or just so happen to have like a 64GB phone, this can honestly help a lot, especially for something that just takes a few minutes. I'd highly suggest giving this a try. I'll leave a link to the program in the description. Lastly, I wanted to touch up on one more thing. When you search up PPSSPP in the App Store, you're going to see 2 versions. One is free and one is $4.99. They're both identical and will do the exact same thing. The Gold app is just a way to show your support to the project. If you have the means, I'd highly recommend it. These guys are doing a lot of good work open sourcing apps like these for all of us to enjoy for free. Okay, next, the big one, Retroarch. Now this app is huge. This is the everything else app. It's not exactly an emulator itself, but more of an all-in-one app that can run all different types of emulators. Retroarch calls them cores though. Seriously, this thing has pretty much every other emulator you can think of, so you have everything from your retro classics like Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, all the way up to stuff like PSP and PS1. There's no PS2 and GameCube and stuff though, sadly, and I'll explain why in a bit. And all of your games are laid out with this really nice presentation that's reminiscent of the old school PS3 XMB, which I love. And it has tons of features, stuff like borders and shaders and library customization. There is so much room to make this app super pretty and personalized. The catch? Well, unfortunately, the user interface is like pulling teeth. It is really not user-friendly at all. It is a chore to configure. Even the people who like doing this sort of tinkering stuff hate configuring this app. I mean, this is literally what you see when you open the app. It's not friendly at all. Seriously, if you're expecting a simple plug and play, just download the app and go experience, this is not that. There's lots of guides out there to get this app set up, but don't worry, I'm going to show you just enough to get started. So when you first open the app, you're going to see a bunch of stuff running on the screen. You don't have to do anything for this. It's just downloading all the necessary files. Now, the first thing I noticed is, yeah, the select and back buttons are reversed, which means select is circle and X is to go back. We need to fix that. So we're going to click on the cogwheel, go to Input, Menu Controls, and then check this box right here. Finally, now everything works properly. While we're here, we can go to Hotkeys and set a menu toggle. This will let us access a quick menu when we're in game, because otherwise you have to reopen and close the emulator every time. Yeah, are you starting to see what I mean now? A lot of stuff that sounds like common sense needs to be manually set up every time, which is really annoying. I usually set mine to clicking in on both joysticks. It makes the most sense for me. Once all that is finished installing, we're going to change our menu UI. Now, if you're comfortable with this menu setup, that's fine. But I personally like the PS3 style menu a lot more. It makes it a bit easier to navigate. Back to the cogwheel. We're going to scroll down and hit Drivers, Menu, and hit XMB. Okay, finally, let's go save all of our settings so we never have to do this again. By going back to the Home menu, Configuration File, then Save Current Configuration. Okay, let's close out of the app, open it back up, and there you go. Retroarch should be all ready to go. Lastly, I want to show you how to import your ROMs. You can do it in one go. It's really easy. Just make a ROMs folder in your Retroarch folder in your Files app, and in that folder, just separate your ROMs by console, like this. Now back in Retroarch, you go over to this plus sign, hit Scan Directory, go to the ROMs folder, and scan this directory. And it should start auto-populating everything. And that's it. All of them should start flowing in automatically. Best part is, Retroarch will search up the names of your games and automatically download cover arts for all of your games. Yeah, that degree in Retroarchology is starting to pay off now, right? So from here, you should be able to look up the best settings for every console you want to emulate. Seriously, if I sat here and showed you the best for every single emulator this thing has, this would be a 2-hour video. But if you don't want to deal with any of that, I already did all the hard work for you and made an already set up config file so you can just drag and drop it into your Retroarch folder, and all this work that I just showed you is done for you. If you want to grab it, it's going to be in the bonus section of my Discord. Come say hi. Now you might notice that there are some emulators for consoles that already have a standalone app. Which one should you use? Well, honestly, whichever you want. Some people like having a separate app for their individual emulators, while some will want everything in one place. It's totally up to you how you want to set yours up. Now, I'm going to go over a few of the features that Retroarch has, mostly because for a lot of people that's never done any of this emulation stuff, this is likely their first time they've ever used an app like this. Now, you can do this all on your iPhone, by the way. I'm just using the iPad because it's easier to see on camera since I'm recording a video and everything. Now, like I said, there are a ton of cores for Retroarch, so obviously the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, they all work here. They have more 16-bit stuff like Sega Genesis and stuff. Interestingly enough, they also have widescreen cores for these games that make them look really good on these devices. It even works on stuff like Nintendo 64, which looks really good on a widescreen iPhone. Arcade games also look really sick on an iPad. Of course, traditional games look really good on here, but you can just rotate your iPad and just play vertical arcade games the way they were intended to be played, and it looks really, really awesome. And of course, Retroarch also has cores for the higher-end 3D stuff like PS1, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64. It even has higher render resolutions too, so you can push these games up to 4K or 6K or whatever crazy number you kids like these days. Retroarch also has shaders and backgrounds that can completely change the presentation of the game. You can add CRT lines or buttons or even like a map or a guide. There are people that are much smarter than I am that know how to configure this stuff. I'll leave a really good guide in the description. So Retroarch, it's going to be a little rough to set up, not going to lie. I mean, you'll probably end up spending more time tweaking the settings than you actually will be playing the games. but once it's set up, it's easily one of the more robust emulators on this platform. Okay, so you probably noticed by now that I haven't mentioned anything about GameCube or PS2 or Wii or anything like that. And there's a really good reason for that. I'm gonna be straight up with you. There are no emulators for this on the App Store, and there probably never will be. But why though? Well, these emulators are a little bit harder to run than like your average like SNES or PS1 game. So they use something called JIT emulation, or just-in-time emulation. I'm not a super big expert on this stuff, but I'm gonna try to explain it as best as I can. But just remember, I don't have a degree in this stuff, so just hear me out. So emulation is just essentially taking code that was written for a specific console or specific hardware and then translating it into something that another device can read, like say your Windows machine or a Mac OS or your iPhone or something. And translating this stuff takes a little bit of power to do so. It's actually really resource intensive. So that means it's gonna be a little bit slower. So that's where just-in-time emulation kicks in. It's a type of translating that is designed to be like really optimized and super fast, and is supposed to be way more efficient than just traditional emulation. And I can actually show you exactly how this works with an app that's called Folium, which is supposed to be a DS and Game Boy emulator, so it's all the same stuff that Delta can do. But this one is special because it can actually run 3DS games. And this gives us a really good visualization of exactly how hard it is to run games without JIT. I mean, this is an iPhone 15 Pro and it's still dropping frames on even games from 10 years ago. Now, there are some games that do run at almost full speed using this emulator. I think it's like 90% full speed. So if you don't mind like dropping some frames every now and then, it's actually not a terrible experience. But 98% of other games, yeah, it's just gonna be like a miserable experience to play. But this is a really powerful phone. It's an iPhone 15 Pro. It clearly should be strong enough or powerful enough to be able to run just-in-time emulation. So what's the problem? Just slap JIT on there and let's get going. What's the issue? Well, Apple won't allow JIT on iOS devices. They just don't do it. If you submit an application with JIT enabled, they'll reject it and just tell you to disable it. And because of this, other developers have actually come out publicly and said, hey, we're not porting our app or emulator to the iOS App Store anytime soon because we wouldn't be able to do it without JIT, and just the performance just would not be there. And it's not because these phones can't handle it either. There are plenty of YouTube videos out there of showing developer ports of unofficial builds of things like Dolphin running at full speed on iOS, and it runs really, really well. Point is, until Apple changes something, we're probably not going to see Dolphin or GameCube or Wii or PS2 on the App Store anytime soon, unfortunately. Okay, so I want to give you some quick tips that you can take with you that I haven't seen anyone else really talk about, but I think is like really, really useful. So you can actually make your own like app icons for individual games. So it just auto launches into whatever game that you want. It's actually really easy. Just make sure that you have the shortcut app installed for this. Okay, so for Delta, you're going to long press on any game and hit copy deep link. Then you can take that link to the shortcuts app, make a new shortcut, and search up the open URL action. That's what you're going to want. Paste in your link, then tap up here to rename the shortcut. Then you can tap here again to add it to the home screen. From here, you can change the name of the app and even add your own cover art. And there you go, you're done. Okay, so for PSP, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to search open file in the shortcuts app. We're going to pick our own ISO files from the files app and tell it to open it in the PPSSPP app. Save to home screen, add your icons, yada, 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 and bam, icons for your favorite games. You can make little folders for the games that you play the most, which is honestly really, really nice. Okay, next, you can literally text your friends' ROM files through iMessage, which is super cool if it's just like a really small game that you don't want to share with them, or if they're little bigger games, literally just airdrop it to them by touching tips. Yeah, it's really nice to be able to just touch tips with your homies every once in a while and just be able to play with them right away. It's really, really convenient. And in the description, I'm going to leave a link to a list of just the most popular retro games that should help you get started if you haven't been in the emulation scene for a little while and are wondering what to play. These aren't download links or anything. It's just a good place to figure out like what games you might be interested in and what to try out. Listen, what I really want for this video is to be the all-in-one solution video that you can just quickly send off to your friends who are just starting to get into this stuff and hopefully answer most, if not all, of their questions. So if you find this video useful, by all means, send it to a friend or someone that you care about, and hopefully I'll be able to answer most of their questions so they don't have to bug you for everything. I also wanted to let you guys know that I opened up channel memberships and a Patreon now. Members were actually able to see pretty big chunks of this video ahead of time. I know people were asking other ways to be able to help out the channel, and this is a great way to help out and be able to see big chunks of videos as they're being made. So it's a win-win for everyone. I'll leave links in the description if you want to check that out. I'm going to put over here. Anyways, click over here to check out another video, and thank you for watching.